My brother looked at me like I had just set the house on fire. "Tell me you didn't actually send it," he said. His voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear him over the sound of the ceiling fan turning slowly above the dining room table. "Tell me that right now." I looked him dead in the eye, picked up my glass of water, and said one word. "Why?" He pushed back from the table so hard his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. My mother looked up from her plate. My father set down his fork. And just like that, the birthday dinner my parents had thrown for my sister-in-law turned into the moment everything I had spent 8 months quietly building finally ignited. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because if you're going to understand why I did what I did, you need to understand what it felt like to grow up as the invisible one. My name doesn't matter as much as what I survived. I'm 29 years old. I have a master's degree in financial analysis that I paid for entirely on my own through scholarships I applied to every single year and a part-time job at an accounting firm where I worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load. Nobody in my family came to my graduation, not because they couldn't. Because my brother had a recreational soccer game that afternoon and my parents didn't want to miss it. I am not exaggerating. I have the text message from my mother saved. It says, and I quote, "Honey, you understand, right? You always understand." I did understand. I understood perfectly. I had been understanding my entire life. My brother is 4 years older than me. From the time we were children, the rules were different for him. When he failed ninth grade English, my parents hired a private tutor. When I asked for help with my college applications, my mother told me I was smart enough to figure it out myself. When my brother wrecked his first car at 19 because he was driving drunk, my father paid off the other driver quietly and bought him a newer model within the month. When I got a speeding ticket at 22, my parents gave me a lecture about responsibility that lasted 2 hours and told me I needed to learn that actions have consequences. My brother married into money 5 years ago. His wife, I'll call her what my mother calls her, the one we always hoped for, comes from a family that owns 3 car dealerships in the Dallas area and a vacation property in Colorado. My parents loved her immediately, not for who she was but for what she represented. She was proof that my brother had done something right. She was the gold star they could finally show their friends. I was the footnote. When I got engaged 2 years ago to the man I love, who works as a high school football coach in Austin, my mother's first response was, "Well, I hope you're not expecting a big wedding." My father shook his hand exactly once and then spent the rest of the evening asking my brother about his plans to expand the dealership business. My fiancé, patient, steady, kind in a way I still don't fully feel I deserve, squeezed my hand under the table and said nothing. That was November. By the following March, the first cracks in my family's golden story had started to show. My brother called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I was making dinner, standing in my kitchen in Austin with a pan of chicken on the stove, and his name came up on my phone and I almost didn't answer. We weren't close. We had never been close. He called maybe 4 times a year, and usually only when he needed something. "Hey," he said. "I need to talk to you about something, but you have to promise not to say anything to Mom and Dad yet." I should have said no. I should have told him I wasn't interested in being pulled into whatever drama was unfolding in his perfectly curated life. Instead, because I was still, after 29 years, hoping that one day my brother and I might actually be family, I said, okay. What he told me over the next 40 minutes unraveled something inside me that has never fully come back together. His wife's family business was in serious trouble. Not slow quarter trouble. Not we need to restructure trouble, the kind of trouble that comes with federal investigators and frozen accounts and lawyers who charge $800 an hour. Her father had been quietly siphoning money from the dealership operating accounts for over a decade, running it through a series of LLCs he'd set up in Nevada and funneling it into personal investments in real estate markets in Arizona and Florida. The business had looked healthy on paper because he was also taking out loans against the dealerships themselves, using the property as collateral, and rolling the debt forward every 18 months. When interest rates spiked, the whole structure collapsed in about 6 weeks. None of that was my problem. What became my problem was what my brother said next. "Dad has been investing with him for the past 3 years," my brother said. "He moved money out of the joint account he has with Mom. She doesn't know. And some of it is," he paused. "Some of it is from your education fund." I put the chicken pan on the back burner and turned off the stove. "What education fund?" I said. "The one Grandma set up for both of us when we were kids. Dad was managing it. He was supposed to split it equally when we each turned 25. He gave me mine early when I was 22 for the down payment on the house. Yours is still supposed to be there. But some of it, he didn't finish the sentence. I finished it for him. He invested it without telling me, and now it's gone. Silence. How much? I said. $42,000, my brother said, give or take. I stood in my kitchen in Austin, Texas, in the quiet of an ordinary Tuesday evening, and I felt something close in my chest like a door shutting very softly. $42,000. My grandmother had saved that money for me over the course of her entire working life. She had lived through the Depression, she had sewn her own clothes and grown vegetables in her backyard, and clipped coupons until the day she died. And she had set aside that money, specifically for my education, specifically for me. And my father had taken it without a word and handed it to a man who used it to fund a Florida real estate scheme that was now the subject of a federal investigation. My brother wanted me to stay quiet. That's why he called me. He wasn't confessing out of guilt, he was managing the situation. He needed me to know so that I couldn't claim later I hadn't been informed. He needed me not to make waves while he and his wife and her family tried to figure out how to protect what was left. I told him I needed to think. What I actually needed was 8 months. I have a master's degree in financial analysis. I want you to remember that. I did not make a single call or send a single email for 30 days. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner. I sat next to my fiancé on the couch and let him think I was watching whatever was on TV while I was actually running through everything I knew about my brother's situation, my father's involvement, and exactly what kind of paper trail something like this would leave. After 30 days, I started making calls, quietly. To a forensic accountant I had met through work, a woman named, well, she asked me not to use her name, so let's just say she was extraordinarily good at her job. To a tax attorney in Houston who specialized in family financial disputes. And to a contact at the IRS Civil Investigations Division that I had worked with 2 years earlier on a completely unrelated matter through my firm. What I found over the next 7 months was worse than what my brother had told me. My father had not just moved money from my education fund. He had been an active participant in his son-in-law's financial scheme for over 3 years, not as a passive investor but as a signer on 2 of the Nevada LLCs. He had received distributions. He had filed taxes that did not accurately reflect those distributions. And he had done all of this while accepting my mother's paycheck as a kindergarten teacher and keeping the household running on what she believed was their retirement savings. My mother did not know. I am certain of that. Whatever my father was, my mother was simply a woman who had spent her whole life trusting the wrong people. The harder part was my brother. He had known longer than he told me. His call to me had not been a confession. It had been a calculated move to get me on record as informed before everything collapsed, so that if I later tried to take legal action over my education fund, he could claim I had waited and therefore implicitly accepted the situation. He had consulted with a lawyer before he called me. I found that out from a billing statement that surfaced later. I built a complete picture: 14 months of bank records, tax returns, LLC filings, distribution statements, and wire transfer confirmations. I organized everything in a shared folder that was exactly the kind of documentation a federal investigator would need to open a formal inquiry. I did not do this out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I did it because $42,000 of my grandmother's savings had been taken from me without my consent, and the people who took it were planning to let the scheme collapse quietly while I received nothing and said nothing, and understood, the way I always understood. On a Friday evening in February, I sent a single email. The subject line was voluntary disclosure, related party documentation. It went to 3 addresses: my forensic accountant, who had agreed to serve as a go-between with the IRS Civil Investigations contact, the tax attorney, and a 4th person I haven't mentioned yet, a journalist at a Dallas business publication who had been covering the dealership family's collapse, and had reached out to me 6 weeks earlier after finding my name in connection with one of the LLCs. I did not send the email to my father. I did not send it to my brother. I did not call anyone to warn them. I drove home to my parents' house the following weekend because my mother had asked me to come to my brother's wife's birthday dinner. The timing was not accidental. I had known for 3 weeks that the civil investigation would be formally opened on the Monday after that dinner. I had known for 2 weeks that the Dallas journalist story would run on Sunday morning. I had known for 1 week that my brother had started moving money into his wife's personal accounts in what his attorney would later describe as an ill-advised attempt to shield assets. I wanted to look my family in the face one time before the world they had built on quietly stolen things came apart. I sat at that dinner table and ate pot roast and listened to my mother talk about her students and watched my brother pour wine for his wife and heard my father make a toast about family being the most important thing in the world. And I felt, for the first time in my adult life, completely calm. It was my brother who cracked. I still don't know how he found out about the email. I think someone at his wife's family's attorney's office got wind of the incoming documentation and reached out to him. Whatever the cause, halfway through dinner he excused himself and came back from the hallway with a look on his face I had never seen before. That look was fear. He leaned down next to me and said very quietly, "So our parents couldn't hear, tell me you didn't actually send it." And I said, "Why?" Because he already knew the answer, and I wanted him to say it out loud. He straightened up. My mother looked between us. My father set down his fork. And my brother, who had spent 30 years being the one this family orbited around, said, with his voice going unsteady in a way I had never heard, "She sent it. She actually sent it." My father's face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 4 seconds. My mother said, "Sent what? What are you talking about? What is going on?" I put my napkin on the table, stood up, picked up my bag, and said, "Happy birthday," to my sister-in-law, who, to her credit, looked like she had been expecting something like this for a very long time. I drove back to the hotel I had booked 3 days in advance because I had known I would not be sleeping in my childhood bedroom that night. I ordered room service, I watched 2 episodes of a show I can't even remember now, and I slept better than I had in 8 months. Sunday morning, the story ran in the Dallas business section. By Sunday afternoon, it had been picked up by 3 national financial news outlets. The headline used the phrase, "family network of LLCs," and named the Nevada entities and the Florida real estate connections. My father's name appeared in the 4th paragraph. By Monday morning, the civil investigation was formally open. My brother called me 11 times between Sunday at noon and Monday at 7 a.m. My father called 4 times. My mother called once at 10 p.m. on Sunday night, and when I picked up, she didn't say anything for a long moment, and then she said, "Was the $42,000 real?" "Yes," I said. Another long silence. "I didn't know," she said. "I know," I said. "I know you didn't." She cried for about 10 minutes, and I stayed on the phone with her, because whatever she had done wrong, which was mostly being the kind of person who trusts completely and asks few questions, she did not deserve what was about to happen to her life. When she calmed down, I told her she needed to get her own attorney, completely separate from my father's, immediately. I gave her the name of someone I had already identified for exactly this purpose. She wrote it down. That was the last conversation I had with my father for 14 months. The investigation moved the way these things move, slowly, then all at once. By April, the Nevada LLCs had been formally dissolved and the assets frozen. By June, my brother's attempt to shield funds had been flagged as a separate issue, and his own attorney had quietly withdrawn from the case. By August, my father had entered into a civil settlement agreement that required him to disgorge the distributions he had received plus interest, totaling a little over $60,000, and to cooperate with the ongoing criminal investigation into his father-in-law. My grandmother's $42,000, or rather a check for $42,000 from the civil settlement, plus 14% interest, arrived in a certified envelope 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized. I held that check for a long time before I deposited it. It was not really about the money. It was never really about the money. It was about the fact that someone had looked at what my grandmother had sacrificed for me and decided that my future was less important than maintaining a comfortable lie. It was about 30 years of, you understand, right? And it was about the fact that the only reason I had survived and built a life and earned a degree that let me see through what they had done was precisely because they had never invested in me. The very thing they used against me, their neglect, their indifference, the way they had always assumed I would simply absorb whatever I was given and remain quiet, had made me exactly the person capable of dismantling what they built. I was the one they bet against. I was the one they forgot to account for. 3 months after the settlement, my company offered me a senior position. My fiancé and I set a wedding date for the following spring. My mother, slowly and carefully, began rebuilding something with me. Not what we had, because what we had was not worth rebuilding, but something new, something honest, where she asked me real questions and listened to the actual answers. It was small, it was hard, some weeks it barely existed. But it was more real than anything we had before. My brother and I have not spoken since that birthday dinner. His wife filed for divorce 8 months after the investigation opened. My father is cooperating with prosecutors and living in the house he bought with my mother, who is not divorcing him but is also not, as far as I can tell, forgiving him. That distinction seems important to her, and I respect it. I don't think about revenge very often anymore. What I think about is how long I spent making myself small so that the people around me could feel large. How many times I said I understand when what I meant was, this is wrong and I am the only one in this room who can see it. How many years I believed that being overlooked was my nature, rather than a choice someone else was making about me, over and over again, because it was convenient for them. My grandmother would have been 83 this year. She never saw me graduate. She never met my fiancé. She left me money because she believed I would do something with my life that was worth leaving money for. I deposited that check on a Thursday morning in September. I walked out of the bank into a day that was so clear and blue it looked almost artificial, the kind of Texas sky that doesn't look real until you're standing under it. And I thought about the woman who had clipped coupons and grown tomatoes in her backyard and quietly set aside what she could, over decades, for a granddaughter she believed in. She was right about me. She was the only one for a very long time who was, and as it turned out, that was enough.